months I've been thinking about school socialness and going up to groups, and many know up to today that I have not been able to fully assimilate into a group. And although I do blame groups primarily and their own indirect mistakes they make toward other newcomers, and of course established boundaries and other groups that may not be spoken, a part of it also goes to my analytic. I analyzed everything with clarity, and I did hit a huge troubles when it came to groups and looking at every single mistake like it was the end. High school and major adolescence is a time this naturally happens, but I began to realize with many of the sports rounds that I've been watching, in order to combat this social anxiety, from Cricket League India to America's MLB to simple volleyball games or soccer games that I just watched from a bleacher, they all operate with a high degree of complexity, and I began to realize that in these things too, their teams, high school groups kind of mimic that complexity that leagues have because a team is complex. In volleyball, you got servers. In baseball, there are pitchers and batters. In a social group, that kind of mimics in that there's a chill character, there's a chill person, there's the main person who instigates all the drama, there's someone who keeps dragging down. There's always characters of each unique place. Everybody has their own role, just like sports. And I began to realize is that my mind will analyze everything. That is no flaw. So I began to say that what if I think about the entire high school environment, from girls to boys? What if they're all their own metaphorical football, soccer, softball, baseball teams, and in their own with their own batters and own people? There's even solo teams too. And my thinking changed from purely literal to abstract in a parallel thought. What if I would structure my thinking in such a way to match that complexity of teams and what usually is a source of anxiety? Let's push that into a source of pure metaphor. Instead of saying I talked to some people and I felt was honest, I can use that but put it into metaphor. So it is today I pitched against the team with good defense and I think they were pretty kind. In a way that abstractly changes everything in social fear. That turns from a typical large group that I might be afraid of going to into a heavy defensive roster worth pitching for. In a typical sense, well, I've always never believed in the idea of pressing the other, a gender or trans people, but I've never found a way to be effective in unconventional minds. But I realize in the analytical mind, if I could aim for as a sports game, like I could be famous as a strikeouts, it becomes something to do, something to show up for, something becomes a part of the game instead of something to be afraid of. And in my own case, if all teams are their own metaphorical team, then I have my own baseball team, which I'll title its ADR. In this case, I have my own batter, my own Mike Trout, my own Ohtani, and simultaneously the worst player ever. I'm also the dugout manager, the batter, and the pitcher, and everything that is of a team. Back in other groups that I've also felt pretty scared of, it reframes it all because imagine every single social interaction last year that I had. Davin's crazy boy groups that weren't much girlfriend. And a few others. There's like a lot of girl groups I've joined. But in metaphor, I was the only one on my team pitching for their team. That's kind of like underdog or a solo boy narrative. I was not effective. I didn't have as much skill as them. But even last year, looking back at even other people, I described the fear that I had approaching this. I did feel afraid. I did say that anxiety, but I still pushed anyway. But now the metaphor changes that. Now next week, I would feel excited to go to school because I wouldn't just want to talk to people. I'll be pitching. I would want to play and really talk to others. And most importantly, I would want to play against my own social fear. I think this metaphor would not work for others because there are more literal people out there, just things as they are. For me, it rewires my own analytical curiosity and changes it into a team legacy. And at the end, I'm still pitching to actually join a friend group but that gamification process would make it in such a way that it would be worth it. Even outside school where I do want to talk with people, go up to like the most scariest group that I think and still go to pitch anyway. And most people today still hate going back to school, even me too. But I think with metaphor, this takes meeting people into something that's legendary. It reframes social anxiety and rejection as a data point, a base run, or a failed pitch, and not something to take personally. And that turns it into one of the most unique ways of doing things. I know my friend Davin told me and other people who have their own romantic partners also told me to go the literal path, just get a friend group the typical way, or eventually end up going to riz up someone the typical charismatic way. And I'll take some ideas from there, but my intellect goes deeper than typical charisma, and I think to reframe that fear, I would absolutely need something much more complex. Essentially, that will be pitching for another team. Imagine I do end up liking something. I do want to ask them out, like a boy named John or something. Socially, that looks pretty scary. Most people would just look at the quest. In sport, that changes the metaphor because say Ella gives like a name like BGG or something. Probably the most awkward team, but we'll switch that to Ella's girl group, so EGG at that point. But in metaphor, that becomes ATR versus EGG for the inning during that time. And that changes from social anxiety to I am scared to approaching this game to another large defensive roster that wants to catch it. And that. And specifically, I know some of my boys will kind of fit this approach, and I know who I've talked to before, because this might alienate certain simple-minded thinkers or people. And yes, it will. I cannot make everybody happy. Nobody can make me happy. But I will not treat people directly as baseball games in terms of their own parts of personalities. Starting a group, I learn social cues about daily conversation, and that those are all a part of the action. Base runs, the home runs, but the personal things like the social problems or deep worries and chats that are told that happen do not count. That changes everything from the groups in the library out of school. They are no longer scary people, but they become on the scoreboard. GGL versus ADR. Library. That sounds more exciting than I went to the library to talk to someone. the end, that would change the simple interaction, whether people are best extroverts or shy introverts, because everybody struggles socially sometimes. But I think the metaphor teaches that showing up and batting would be far more important than simply staying out of fear of doing nothing, because it kind of pushes me out because now I want to make friends and go to as many people as possible until I find a group to sell it. First day of school at that point becomes a dreadful day to a day to start of the season and possibly hit our first solo run since Noel the Unbearable. To find a metaphor that one day leads to some unique situations beyond. So far, we've already started the season at least a month ago, so at that point it's just a ceremonial day next Wednesday to just continue playing, which is cool, but I may as well play today for Sunday and some random plays and go pitch. Starting on like fifth documented away game in this metaphor, but even then, I would say that joining a club or talking to some people would also end up becoming its own extra gaming compared to school day, so in that case, no day will be boring at all. Every day is a sports game in metaphor, and that's a metaphor that's going to guarantee that 0 out of the 180 days of school will never be boring at all. But then again, it is also pretty interesting because it reframes social fear as a strikeout, as a data point, and not something to take personally. I think this metaphor can also be adapted into softball, volleyball, and soccer or American football, so it's pretty unique.